Now, Bafana Bafana recently played out to a 1-1 draw against Andorra in an international friendly match. The result was disappointing for Bafana Bafana, especially considering their strong performance at the Africa Cup of Nations in Ivory Coast earlier this year, where they won the bronze medal. The lineup, which was selected by coach Hugo Broos, was experimental, with 4 debutants in the starting 11 and only 2 players with double figures in caps. South Africa faces a significant challenge as they prepare to play against North African giants Algeria in another international friendly at the Nelson Mandela Stadium in Algiers on Tuesday evening. So this match is set to test the South Africans. To discuss these 2 friendly matches further, we have the SABC sport reporter Chad Klate and freelance journalist Njabulo Ngidi with us. A very good evening to you, gentlemen. What a very interesting showing from Bafana Bafana. I mean, we're very excited to see them back in action after we last saw them in action in February, where they really made the country proud, finishing in a credible 3rd position. Chad, I will start with you. In terms of that result against Andorra, do you feel it was disappointing, or for coach Hugo Broos, was it what he wanted to achieve in terms of this experimental side that he brought on?
Yeah, good evening, Ollie. Good evening to the viewers. I think it was, as you say, very experimental, and playing a team that's ranked 164th in the world was always going to be a tough nut to crack. Even though they are European opposition, and European teams often enjoy sort of walkovers against the Andorrans. But Hugo Broos knew exactly what to expect before the game. He spoke to the media online. And he explained that, this is a very physical opponent, and they don't concede many goals. And that's what we saw. They obviously profited off that very costly mistake by Ricardo Goss, who was making his first appearance in, I think, more than a year. So he was, kind of rusty, and given the opportunity, I think it just slipped through his hands, or slipped under his feet, should I say. And the Andorrans capitalized. So I think he was, well within his rights to sort of take his time and find his feet. But that early on, after 5 minutes, I think the Andorrans just, would bite down his throat and faster than expected. And they obviously made the game more frustrating for Bafana. But I think, it was a good showing of several individuals, which Hugo Broos was trying to look at and see who can actually fit into his team. In the next games, with the World Cup qualifiers and the AFCON qualifiers for 2025 coming up as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, we saw the celebrations from the Andorrans, how much that goal meant for them against the South African side. Njabulo, we look at this match. We know that it was acting as preparation for this upcoming encounter against Algeria, and of course the World Cup qualifiers against Nigeria in June. In terms of Andorra as an opposition, do they tick the boxes in terms of the kind of quality of nation that we needed Bafana Bafana to face when you look at these upcoming encounters against Algeria and Nigeria?
Good evening. I think we do, because I think one of the things that game did was to test Bafana's mental strength. For the longest time, we struggled against lowly oppositions, teams where we expected to sort of beat. And that was the case in that game against Andorra. You saw how Bafana struggled in a game where, the team was almost 100 places lower than them, and they couldn't really penetrate and dominate that game, which is what we're going to need in the upcoming qualifiers. In the World Cup qualifiers, we've got Lesotho, and there are going to be lowly teams even in the AFCON qualifiers. So I think there was a mental test for Bafana that sadly we failed, because it's not just in terms of who you face, but it's also how you handle the situation, especially when a number of the players that were playing in that game were players who have been knocking on the Bafana door. So it was an opportunity for them to show what they have. And sadly, I don't think a lot of them really gave it all and showed that they deserve to be in the national team. And obviously, it's unfair to judge them on one game, but based on that game, I think maybe Mokwana and even Bandra are players who say they can be in the fringes of the squad that Broos is going to take to the World Cup qualifiers against Nigeria and Zimbabwe in June.
And I know this was, a different makeup of the team that actually played in the AFCON, but Njabulo, it is also so frustrating that a Bafana Bafana side is able to do something of this nature in the continental showpiece, play so well against Moroccans, Tunisians, and then when they have to face a side like Andorra, and in the past, other lowly ranked teams, they're just unable to unlock the opposition. What is that missing factor for Bafana Bafana? Why can't they get it right in matches where people think they will walk away 6-0 victors,
I think it's a mental issue that goes, especially, it's even prevalent in the PSL, where you see teams, a good example is Milford FC. They raise their game against Chiefs because it's a game of high pedigree against, it's going to be watched by a number of people. But when they're playing against teams that when they had to play Stellenbosch, they were slaughtered. Even in the first division, they were slaughtered. So it's a South African mindset where we tend to raise and rise to then play the occasion when we're playing against big teams where it will sort of not expected to do anything. And then in games where everyone expects Bafana to do something, we just take for granted that we have to show up and think that the results are going to take care of themselves. It's a problem that has happened even before Bruce came over. Even on Baxter at some point, we beat Nigeria and then lost to Cape Verde. Same with Shakes, we lost to Mauritania. I think it's something that we really need to look into, not just Bafana, but in South African football, in terms of why do we have players who play certain games and then in certain games they just pitch up and not really give it their all.
And of course, Chair, you also, alluded to this in terms of the new faces that we saw. It was great to see Mokoena scoring on debut. And I guess for Hugo Broos, it's also signaling a transition, I guess, for younger players to now take position in the senior team. Were any of these young and new players, did they impress you at all? Did some of them really just tick the box for you?
Yeah, I think, as Njabulo alluded, and as Hugo Broos also mentioned, the level from, stepping up from PSL to international level, where you're playing, even if you're playing against Andorra, Lesotho, Mauritania, whatever the case is, I think players, don't often get exposure to that type of level, unless you're obviously playing for Mamelodi Sundowns, Orlando Pirates, and in years gone by, Kaizer Chiefs. But, several players, Elias Mokoena, of course, the way he took his goal, very well taken, so well composed. He knew exactly what he wanted to do in that instance. And that's something you see from, a player that shows potential to go on and play in higher levels than just the PSL. So I think, he's definitely one to look out for. He's had a, pretty consistent time at Sekhukhune United as well. So I think his growth trajectory is on the up, and I definitely think he could slot into this Bafana side, whether it's on the fringes for now, but in future he could definitely step up. And then Banjo, I think he was one of the surprise packages. A lot of us were surprised when he was named in the initial squad to begin with. And Hugo Broos explained that he's a youngster that he likes, and I think he took advice from his assistant coach Helman Kalele, who's obviously locally based, and he gets to see a lot more games rather in person than Hugo does, where he relies more on video. And I think he surprised quite a few people with the level he showed. Playing with Amazulu, sometimes it can be a bit tough, and they struggle with results and consistency. But he showed that he could be one that steps up into the international setup in years to come.
All right. And Njabulo, of course, now we are looking forward to what's going to be happening against Algeria. Is it crucial for Bafana Bafana to win this encounter, or is it more about seeing combinations and the kind of strategies that Hugo Broos wants to bring forth?
I think it's important to win because this is the direct test of facing Nigeria. There are a bit of similarities between Algeria and Nigeria, in that both teams are in somewhat transition. Jose Peseiro hasn't been that long in the coaching job of Nigeria. He's still not a light figure because people don't like the football Nigeria was playing. So he's a coach who has a lot to prove. It's the same with the Algerian coach. Vladimir, who just joined after they fired Belmadi. This is going to be second game. They played and beat Bolivia 3-2 in the first game, and it's in Algeria. So I think it's a great test for the game against Nigeria. We're going to be playing against a very passionate and loud crowd, against a team that has a lot to prove. I mean, Algeria, we're terrible at the AFCON. Having won it in 2019, the depths that the lows that they've reached is something that they want to sort of rise from. So if we can get a positive result in this game, then it bodes well in preparing for the game against Nigeria, because in this game, we're likely to see more or less the squad that we're going to use against Nigeria. And it's important to sort of see how that test is going to be like.
It's going to be a very interesting test because, Chad, we know that Algeria are missing some of their key players, in the likes of Riyad Mahrez, but as Njabulo also spoke about it, they secured a very important victory against Bolivia. What are your impressions of this North African giant? And more to that, are we going to see a much stronger Bafana Bafana side with the regulars that we saw in the Africa Cup of Nations?
Yeah, no, it's obviously Riyad Mahrez is obviously the standout player, but they've still got Buneja, they've still got Said Bin Rama coming back into the side who missed out on AFCON. So they've got a couple of guys, trying to prove their worth in the Desert Foxes side. So it should be a stern test against Bolivia. They were 2-1 down at one stage, and they managed to fight back and score 2 goals to obviously make sure they win it. And these results, as another reminder, is the AFCON draw is happening later this year, which has a seeded section, and we obviously want to try and improve our rankings on the FIFA rankings so that we make sure that we are, we stay in the top 10 and we are amongst the seeded teams that gets drawn in later this year. And more so, we need to build momentum now going to that Nigeria game, as Njabulo mentioned. And I think Hugo, speaking from Algiers earlier today, where he was saying that some players are going to be tested in this match, but he's generally going to go with players that have been tried and tested. We're likely to see the Mamelodi Sundowns contingent coming back into the team, but his main concern is obviously in the strike force. We don't have Mahopa, we don't have a seasoned striker that we know we can rely on. Kaniso Mayo obviously he's been brought in now, much to a lot of fanfare that he can't be left out. But Hugo's spoken about his level, whether he drifts in and out of matches. Sometimes he shows up, sometimes he doesn't show up. So I think the focal point for us will be where the likes of Kaniso Mayo or Ikram Reyners can actually step up and show their worth on the international stage. Particularly when we have a case of Lyle Foster, who we still don't know if he's coming back to Bafana. Lebo Matiba is obviously still on the recovery from his knee surgery. So we don't know what our strike force is going to look like come June when we face Nigeria. So these guys really have an opportunity to step up and show that they can actually score some goals for Bafana should we have an absence of regulars.
Absolutely. Really great chatting to both of you, gentlemen. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Hoping to be chatting to you after the Algeria encounter, just to have a look at how those World Cup qualifiers are going to be looking for us. Thank you there to Chad Klate, SABC sport reporter, and of course, Njabulo Ngidi, who is also a freelance sports journalist. They are saying that match against Algeria on Tuesday is a must-win for Bafana Bafana as they prepare for the World Cup qualifiers in June against Nigeria.